this morning. The Janus Institute and Rock, Paper, Scissors, Amanda and Valerie are on with us this morning. We're pleased to do these occasional webinars and discuss other ways to communicate and share information during this time of economic crisis. And if anybody doubts it is a crisis, we were just discussing the fact that the April unemployment rate is 14.7%, virtually within a month. The Janus approach to learning and peer sharing is for everybody to share and ask questions and comment. So please do that during the webinar. Any questions or comments that we do not get to during the course of the webinar, we will post along with a summary of the webinar on the new website that Rock, Paper, Scissors and I, Janus Institute, have put together called prosperousplaces.org. That's prosperousplaces.org. So today our topic is tourism in a COVID world. As many of you know, tourism is vital to your communities, many communities, even though sometimes it's not given its due. For many communities, it is the #1 industry, but there's no industry code for tourism. So the employment and spending effects of tourism are scattered throughout retail, restaurant, lodging, and related industries. But it's, as I said, critical for many industries and for some the #1 industry. Also in my career, I've so often seen synergy between tourism and traditional economic development, i.e. business attraction, retention and expansion, and new business startups, in that a lot of tourists that come into communities say, hey, I like this place and maybe I could live here and maybe I could have a business here. I've seen that happen so many times. So I guess the question is, one question this morning is, how do we get tourism back on track? When do we get tourism back on track in a COVID world? And how do we walk the fine line between, well, we want you all to come, but not yet, maybe? That's a tough job for any tourism director or any community. That's a tough line to walk. So to introduce our panel and get us started this morning on those topics, I'll turn it over to my good colleague, Amanda Sutt, who is the CEO of Rock, Paper, Scissors. Amanda, good morning.
Good morning. Thank you, Robert. Glad that everybody could join us this morning. We still have some people trickling in, so we're letting people in as we can. I am the creative director and CEO at Rock, Paper, Scissors, and we're a branding and marketing firm. And we help our clients align their message with their brand so that their team, their community, and audience, so they're speaking from one voice to achieve that vision and purpose. And so we've been in this business for 30 years, and we've seen a lot of changing. Done a lot of changing. We're going to continue to do a lot of changing. And so part of that is facilitating this conversation with two colleagues I'm very pleased to have join us today. First up, I have Lisa Anders, who's the Executive Director of Explore Gwinnett and Gwinnett County's liaison for the film and movie industry. So Explore Gwinnett is Gwinnett County's official tourism agency that works to draw conventions, meetings, conferences, and sports tournaments to Gwinnett County, while also providing destination marketing to the cities in Gwinnett County and overseeing the Gwinnett Creativity Fund. And those who don't know, Gwinnett is a metro county as part of Atlanta, Georgia. So it's a pretty big area that we're dealing with. And then I also have joining us today is Stephen Sloan, and he is the founder of the Humane Leadership Institute and the board president for Ashland Independent Film Organization. He's based up in Ashland, Oregon. And so the Humane Leadership Institute's mission is to positively impact global leadership culture by supporting those who share values of fair strength, wise balance, and generative care to building communities through local development meetings to connect peers who collaborate to refine helpful models, develop actionable insights, and create opportunities to participate in humane leadership. So I am so excited of a neat mix with local in the industry. And I'm going to open up just to kind of start with, I want to let each one of you start with sharing a little bit about the communities you support, and the reason that we have brought the two of you here today will reveal itself as you start to share your story. So Lisa, I'd like you just to share what's going on in Gwinnett right now. Oh, hold on a second. Lisa, you are muted. Let's get you back on. Oh, I think you're muted on yours.
Got me?
There you go. Yay, now go.
Thanks. Thanks, Amanda. As you mentioned, Gwinnett County, we're about 45 minutes north of downtown Atlanta. And, historically, we're the furthest county away from the airport and from sort of the epicenter of downtown and midtown. And that sometimes in the past has been a negative for us from a tourism perspective. But I will tell you that in this era, it's sort of played to more of a positive. We're a drive market, so we are sort of reaping the benefits that we are not near the airport, and we are more of a suburban market. So the impact has not been as impactful as the rest of Atlanta. That being said, it's been hugely impactful. We're a very diverse community. We have the largest Korean population in the Southeast. So the international market is hugely important to us, and that's something that we can see the impact of. We work with Korean visitors, Chinese visitors, Vietnamese visitors, and in the blink of the eye, we can see that those markets are going to be incrementally different in the future. That's something that we're going to have to change. Our hotels, we have 115 hotels. We've had 4 of them close, which is not a huge amount, but our occupancy, which is typically 75%, is at 40%. So that's a lot of people who had jobs 4, 5, 6, 7 weeks ago who don't have jobs today. So when people say, where is your tourism industry today? The first 4 weeks of this crisis, I feel like we've been a social service agency more than a tourism agency. I feel like we've had to sort of put aside our tourism mission this first 4 weeks and make sure that our community is focused on making sure that our employees at our hotels have hand sanitizers and PPEs, and that our extended stay hotel guests don't get kicked out, and that the food items that we have in our office for our welcome bags, normally we would be putting them into welcome bags for our convention guests or our sports tournaments. We're actually putting them into like blessings bags for the nurses who work on the COVID units. So it's like on a dime, our mission has changed really fast. So I feel like that our tourism recovery is really just now starting, and the last 6 to 8 weeks have really been about our community recovery. So it's been a really dynamic evolution, and I think we're almost at the very start of our tourism recovery.
Okay. So a couple things I want to just kind of like lay the groundwork for that are unique with Gwinnett that I want to make sure that we start weaving in if it's as appropriate is you oversee film, what's going on with that, and you also oversee this really nice arena. And what does that mean?
Well, the film industry, as a lot of people know in Georgia, is thriving. We're one of the top filming locations in the world. We have a very robust tax incentive, and that drives a lot of that production. Gwinnett County has 2 major film studios. We've got the largest TV production studio in the world, right in Gwinnett County. We typically have anywhere from about 150 locations filming in Gwinnett County, and probably 50 TV shows or feature film productions in our county every year. As of March 13th, we had 13 productions filming in Gwinnett. As of March 14th, we had 0. It was overnight that they turned off. The union, filming is a very unionized industry. The union has really put a stop on filming until that they feel like they can get a handle on the safety procedures. We anticipate that filming will slowly start to trickle back probably in July or August. But filming is going to be very different. I've started to get some inquiries in the last week or 2, but they've been from very smaller non-union productions like reality shows or commercials or just indie productions. it's not going to be, an average TV crew has anywhere from like 90 to 150 people on set. That's really not going to be able to occur. If you utilize a private home, if you're a private homeowner, are you going to let 90 to 150 people who you do not know into your home? That's kind of unlikely. So everything is really going to change. And I don't think anyone really knows how it's going to change.
Sure.
So, excuse me, that's still a little bit of a work in progress. The Infinite Energy Arena is our major convention center complex. It's a 13,000 seat arena, very successful, one of the top revenue producers amongst mid-sized arenas, one of the top 10 in the world amongst its size. And it is currently dark. And that is a big challenge for us because it's a major revenue producer. We've lost probably since March through probably the beginning of August, at least $10 million in revenue. And a lot of that has rescheduled, but as anyone who knows event venues, rescheduling something is not the same as you can replace it, but that doesn't mean you make it up, because you could have had another event in September. You're just equaling it. You're not really earning it back. That is a huge challenge. Our venue employs over 100 full-time employees, so it has been dark. We've had a few small events in there into the convention center, but our arena has essentially and will be dark for probably 4 or 5 months. And that is, I don't think that anyone really knows. And that is the biggest question mark, is when are people going to feel comfortable sitting in a facility with 13,000 people in it? Yeah. In February and March, I will tell you, I personally went to 3 concerts there. I went to Post Malone, which had probably 14,000 people in the arena. Fantastic concert. Million people just all over each other in that arena. I don't know when that feeling is going to be back. When are people going to feel comfortable? And that is really what people are trying to figure out, is how do we not just make that happen, but how do we make people feel comfortable with that happening again? So that is still a work in progress at that facility. I'll be really candid.
Yeah, I'm sure. And that's actually kind of a good setup for Stephen, who on a little bit smaller scale is dealing with that out in Ashland, Oregon, with your major tourist draw, the Oregon Shakespeare Festival, who is not producing this year. Can you give us a little insight into what's going on up there?
Right, yeah, just a little background if you don't know about Ashland, which you may not. Ashland is a town of 21,000 people right near the California-Oregon border. So we're 6 hours from San Francisco and 5 hours from Portland, and really nothing in between, rural communities. So it's a little bit like Berkeley, stuck in the middle, kind of the hippie, crazy edge of Berkeley, stuck in the middle of the Midwest, kind of socially and economically. But it was a pioneer town. I mean, people came here in 1850s, coming out by wagon train. And so in the late 1800s, we kind of became part of the Chautauqua movement, which was bringing speakers like Mark Twain and William Jennings Bryan and these guys around to bring culture into small towns. And we also had the Grange and all kinds of cooperative movements, and that's still alive here. But part of that was the foundation of a Shakespeare Festival, bringing community-produced plays, basically. And so now the Oregon Shakespeare Festival is one of the leading presenters of Shakespeare's work in the country. We do 6 plays at a time for 9 months a year. Hundreds of artists and producers and musicians are in town and live in town. But all that's shut down now. So Oregon Shakespeare Festival represents about 120,000 visitors a year for us, and they tend to be elderly and fairly wealthy. They come in from all over the country, but mainly West Coast. And so that's completely shut down. We just found out on Friday they decided to not do anything this year. So of course we have hundreds of restaurants and really great food and wine scene, many wineries here as well. And so the impact on them is going to be tremendous. It's hard to even imagine yet what that will be. So let's see, what else have I got? That's the, you know, the thing about this town, this kind of community spirit. This is a town that gathers, right? We, for 4th of July, or for the Halloween parade, let's see. So on Halloween, this town dresses up and there are 10 times more people in the parade than on the sidewalks watching the parade. So thousands and thousands of people pack in. And so how this changes the very culture of our town will be interesting to see.
Yeah. So as we have a lot of unanswered questions that we're going to start to have to address as communities. I'd love to hear how each respectively, how your communities are coming together to start to address these unanswered questions. And what are you guys considering doing to be proactive about recovery at this point? I'll start with you, Lisa, again. We'll go in the same order.
I mean, I think from a total community standpoint that Gwinnett has done a really tremendous job. There's a overall kind of community effort called Gwinnett Cares, and they have sort of been the all-encompassing mothership of volunteerism. They've encompassed everything from donations, recovery, homelessness, looking for childcare, literally anything that someone who's been negatively impacted could feel, you can find on this resource page. So they've done a great job. From a tourism perspective, one of the main things that we've really tried to do is be the strongest resource that we could possibly be, because people are scrambling. People are scrambling to do just that one thing that they need to do. They can't be all things to all people right now. So we very much repurposed our entire website to become a resource for our restaurants and for people who need the information about, you know, who is open, who is delivering, who is to go, what shops, you know, these are individual, you know, you think of every shop, and it's really hard because these restaurants, we always focus on independent restaurants, independent shops. These are people, this is their lifeblood. If these shops close or these restaurants suffer, they can't pay their mortgages. So it's really important to help them succeed. So we focused on, you know, virtual opportunities, online shopping, to-go restaurants, really sort of converting our website into helping these independent restaurants and shops survive as much as possible. We have provided like up-to-date data on when our destinations are reopening, and then also try to provide our hotels and our destinations on information on how they can apply for the PPP loans and the economic disaster loans. A lot of them had no idea. There was so much confusion and chaos and misinformation about who could and who could not apply. And so we reached out to a colleague who had some great resources through the Economic Development Association, and they provided us a direct contact, and we're able to provide that to a number of people who were able to successfully apply for the PPP loan, several restaurants, a couple of our hotel chains, and then tried to provide a job source for people who had lost their jobs. So at that point, it still is about community resources and just helping our hospitality and tourism partners become aware of how we can help them. Because right now, people aren't really booking rooms. People aren't necessarily booking conventions. It's really about just helping them keep their focus and their business together. And that's really been our focus. And right now we've kind of transitioned out of that initial 30-day phase, and now we're in our 60-day phase. And now it becomes about, okay, how are we going to start bringing new business into Gwinnett County slowly but surely? And our new phrase is incrementalism, because we know we're not going to bring in our usual 1,000, 2,000 person conference. So we're focusing on the 100 person group or the 50 person group, you know, because we know everyone has to readjust and recalibrate what they can do. And we have to be slow and steady about it, because we cannot afford to make a mistake. Because if we bring in a large group and something happens at our convention center or at one of our big hotels, we will reap a terrible price. So we want to make sure to go slow and steady. So that's kind of our buzzword right now.
Okay. Stephen, what is your community doing to bring people together?
Right. So our city funds the Chamber of Commerce, which works with which promotes tourism for Ashland, et cetera. So they're working very similarly to what Lisa's group is doing. You know, all the resources around the federal response. They're coordinating with the state, with the governor's office around kind of the gating of what's going to open when, and kind of advising from a business perspective about that, and really trying to plan you know, how we reopen, right? And one of the interesting things that's just going on here politically is that you have this tension between kind of the established tourism businesses, which want to obviously survive. We can't blame them for that, but also we have this kind of long-term need to diversify our economy and really shepherd our resources, because we're just at the beginning of this. We don't, the way I like to describe it is, I think we've seen the flash of lightning. The thunder has not really arrived yet. We think we can hear it a little bit, but we actually don't know what the new reality is, and we may not know for some months. So it's very hard for us action-oriented people to watch and wait and see what that new reality is. So over the weekend, actually, or late last week, we had a neighboring city vote. The city council voted to invest city funds and make them available as grants for local businesses. But in Ashland, our city council did not vote to do that same thing. And so already today online, there's a big conversation about why didn't Ashland support those businesses? And I had some conversations with people on the council last week. And you know, I think at some point we need to see who will survive. Warren Buffett has this great image that says, you know, you don't know who's swimming naked until the tide goes out. And the businesses that will survive are the businesses that have been very conservative and have a very strong balance sheet, have assets, have the ability to cut their expenses way back and make it through this time. The problem is we don't even know how long the time will be. We know that demand has been tremendously interrupted here. We're looking at 80% drop in meals tax and 50% drop in lodging tax. So that will give you some sense of how bad it's been just over the last month. But what the summer brings, we don't know, especially if there's smoke here. So that is all happening kind of in official channels, where my role is I'm just a leadership person who happens to live in this community. And I started a conversation among some associates that I have who are downtown business owners, landlords, and this conversation has now grown to include city councilors, the Chamber of Commerce, the head of the economics department, the local university, et cetera, et cetera. So it's now, this is in parallel to the standard conversation around how do we save what we have? And our conversation is morphing into, okay, this could be very, very bad. This could be 50 to 75% of the businesses downtown not making it through the year. Then what? And that's the conversation that the group that I'm involved with is having. What then? How do we avoid being Potterville, right, in the movie It's a Wonderful Life? Because businesses will come in to town, but they may not be the businesses that hold the culture that we now enjoy.
Mm-hmm. So it sounds like your tourism conversations are really just leaning into the other side of that coin, is that economic development, and what does that shift into? Because it's both. It always has been, and it's more obvious.
And our economic development folks have been, we've been lucky in this town to have a very successful tourism business for many years. And we had strategic plans 10 years ago that would say we should diversify. And we were so happy riding that horse that now that horse may not be as healthy, we kind of need to play some catch up in terms of diversification. So it's a very challenging moment because, you know, you can't blame people for riding a winner, right? And tourism is a wonderful industry to have. So.
Absolutely, absolutely. Before I kind of go to the next question, I just want to give a reminder for everybody who's listening in. We're going to open up for questions in a little bit, so go ahead and start posting questions in the chat, and we'll turn that on in just a couple minutes or so as we work through this. But one of the things that I really want to find out from you guys is, how is your community reacting to reopening, and what is that philosophy kind of look like from a community standpoint, because you guys have shared kind of from like a business standpoint what you're thinking, but what are you hearing from people who live in the communities about bringing people in?
I think that in Georgia, it's been interesting. Georgia has been in the news clearly for our reopening strategy. And the mayor of Atlanta and the governor of Georgia have been kind of at odds. But the county commission of Gwinnett and the cities of Gwinnett have been in harmony about their decision to shelter in place for longer than other people. And I think that most people have been pretty amenable to that decision, that they have felt like that the county commission and the cities have made the right decision. And I have really seen, from the business perspective, our hotels and our restaurants and some of our businesses have been extraordinarily cautious. And I think there's an appreciation for it. Restaurants particularly, to be honest, where many restaurants could have fully opened, 2 weeks ago? The majority of them have not chosen to do so because they feel like they cannot in good conscience be as safe and as, that they don't have the level of safety that they need to do that. That people appreciate it. And I think that it's given a lot of people very much an appreciation for the locally owned restaurants. And I know that everyone I know, even in our building, for the last 2 months, we have gone out to lunch every single solitary day. 30 people in this building, which is a limited amount of people, we have gone out to lunch every single solitary day to support the local restaurants that are open and ordered to go. And I do think it's been eye-opening for people about the importance of our local business community. So I think that people are receptive to the fact that businesses are opening slowly. 3 of our big cities just announced that they were going to cancel all city events until July 15th. And we have an extraordinary amount of events in our community between now and July 15th. There's multiple ones every weekend. And you really have not heard a lot of complaints, because I think people realize that the cities are putting a premium on their residents' health and safety. So I think it's been a good thing.
So do you feel like tourism is more pivoting to, in the sense that staycation, support local?
Absolutely. And I feel like that is, I will be honest and say that is definitely part of our strategy moving forward. Part of what we're doing is we're looking to some of our local leaders, and we're looking at them and saying, hey, we know that you are part of X, Y, or Z group. We want to look at you in the short term, in the next 6, 9, or 12 months, bringing that group back to Gwinnett to help us boost the economy. And we will help you, and we're going to incentivize you to do that. And it may be a more low-key event, but I think everything's going to be a little bit more of a low-key event. So absolutely. I think local in terms of shopping and supporting and visiting and traveling is part of our recovery strategy, like a lot of other people's.
Mm-hmm. Stephen, what are you feeling and hearing out there?
Yeah, so absolutely hearing the think local. I mean, I think we could save some percentage of the businesses in town just by stopping ordering from Amazon. We're ordering all kinds of things online that local merchants could shift their inventory slightly and take care of us on. Coordinating that is a difficult thing. And I have very good friends who are leading technology people at Amazon, but we need to be smart. And support those people who are in our community. But what the tension here is very interesting, because Ashland is in the middle of what we think of as the state of Jefferson, which is a set of counties in California and Southern Oregon that actually tried to secede from the states in the 40s. It's very almost libertarian. There are very many libertarian people here, very kind of free thinking. And so there's a real conversation going on in the community around, are we being, sheeple and following the rules, which we have done excellently in Oregon. We were sandwiched between San Francisco and Seattle, where this started, and we have had no deaths in our county and have no cases right now. We hadn't had a new case in 2 weeks, and people are still being very, very conservative. The local grocery co-op just asked everybody to wear masks. Out of respect for the workers who have to be in the building 8 hours a day, everybody should wear a mask. Well, there was huge pushback. Very vocal pushback from a small number of people, we'll say, but they didn't expect it, because our community is usually much more kind of flexible and understanding. So yeah, the tension is rising here, and how we open and how that unfolds will be a very, very interesting thing. But so far, everybody has been super disciplined and super cooperative in distancing and wearing masks and doing all of the good things to take care of each other. Because the frontline people are now our grocery store clerks and our servers in restaurants and our medical, our healthcare people. So it's important.
Yeah,
but there is definitely tension, right? There's absolutely growing tension in the business community and others who say, we've got to get this going, right? The whole balance between the cure not being worse than the disease. Mm-hmm. And here, so far, if you look at a map of cases in the country, we are that big clear area between San Francisco and Portland. That's where we are, and still we're locked down. So it'll be super interesting over the next few days to see how the gates work and how we open up, actually.
Sure. Yeah, it'll be an interesting as that starts to unfold, mm-hmm. and what your community does to pull that together. So we're starting to get some questions in. So I do want to flip over to any questions that people have. So please keep posting them. I want to start with one from CJ. Says, is anyone utilizing what official entities are available to do health and safety inspections or evaluations of particularly of hotel and lodgings, and if anyone who stays contracts the virus, the repercussions, what that looks like, anything along those. So it seems, and CJ, to your question, it mainly is about hotel and lodgings. Is that correct? Okay. I'm seeing a head nod.
Our hotels are trying to follow the American Hotel and Lodging Association. They have a new program called the Stay Safe Stay Safe program, which is a multi-level across the board, from housekeeping to registration to cleaning, kind of all-encompassing safety and health program. And my understanding, I am not an attorney, is from a liability standpoint, and we've actually been talking to our attorney about this because we've had several questions from venues about this. We've had a couple wedding venues ask us, like, if we host a wedding and someone gets sick, are we liable? Mm-hmm. And just in general conversation, once again, not legal, not a legal statement, but if you are following a complete guideline of health and safety procedures, in theory, I don't believe that you can be held liable. And I think that's the sort of the premise behind the Stay Safe program, is that if a hotel is following that, then they can't be held liable. So that is the one that most of our hotels are following. And it was just released by AHLA last week, I think.
Okay.
Thank you.
Excellent. And I do want to say, as we're going into questions, you guys are welcome to unmute yourself if anybody else has some experience and wants to participate in this, what I'm actually going to do, if you guys are okay with it, as I am going to unmute everyone, we'll control this per the Janus style. We're bringing ideas together. That, you know, Lisa and Stephen did a great job of getting us started, but we don't want to limit our knowledge when we have so many great minds here. So we'll see how this goes. I'm going to unmute. Right.
Limit background noise, Amanda. It may make sense.
I'm going to mute a few as we're, yeah, I'm
and
going to.
then people who want to talk can kind of raise their hand by unmuting themselves.
Yep. We've already adjusted. There we go.
Lovely.
I had the master mute on, so I had to at least release it for everybody.
Oh,
There's that awkward moment. All right.
Amanda, while you deal with that technical issue, let me
Go for it.
raise one issue. I'm curious, Stephen and Lisa, have you thought about what your tourism message is now? Lisa, you did a great job of talking about how you're putting out brush fires and damage control. Both Stephen and Lisa understand that. Do you have a tourism message now? Have you pulled ads? And what do you, are you trying to formulate a tourism message post-COVID or as we recover from this? What, and then later after you respond, Lisa, I'd like to hear what Stephen had to say.
Go ahead, Stephen. I might go in first.
Yeah, okay, well, thank you. You know, I have not seen any new messaging, and I think, frankly, it's a little bit early for that. But I think that when the time comes, our messaging will be around safety and kind of getting back to some of the joy of life. You know, we have all been, you know, worked really hard during this time to adjust our lives. And, you know, when do we get to go back? Right? So with my family, we've been trying to balance compliance with safety and some joy of living. Because we won't be able to maintain this unless we find some of the fun again. So I think just as humans, we need to figure that out for ourselves and for our communities. And if we as destinations can be part of that, you know, Ashland obviously has a very good story about being one of the safest places in the country to come.
We don't do, candidly, a lot of advertising, print advertising. We don't really, we don't feel that there's a lot of value in that. We focus only on digital and social. We have pulled most of that back, and most of what we're doing right now is very local and very grassroots. My marketing communications team, we're still kind of evolving what we're going to be doing, but we are actually getting ready to kind of unveil several new initiatives, and we're really going to focus on those, and we're not going to focus as much on safety and health. Not that we're going to ignore it, but I don't want to say that I don't know how to say this without sounding crass, but we don't want to be, everyone's talking about how safe we are. We want to kind of maintain our consistent message that we're family friendly and we're diverse and we're welcoming, because that's always been kind of our message. And we're going to continue with that. We have a new website we're unveiling. We have a new magazine, and we have a new arts grant fund that we're unveiling. We're going to focus on those kind of positive messages, but we're going to wait. We're going to do about probably a month before we really unveil all of those. We're going to kind of continue on our same message. You know, we're going to integrate health and safety into what we do, but we are not going to make it the main point of our messaging. We just don't think that has the, doesn't really get across the point of what we want our community to be known for. We want that to be part of it, but we don't want it to be the only message.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
And if anybody else wants to chime in on what they're doing, please either message in the chat or feel free to unmute yourself. But I do want to keep this going. We've got a good question from Jennifer Callison. Any policies or protocols on reopening visitor centers? So I don't know if the two of you have any experience with that, or if there's anybody who has been talking about opening visitor centers, feel free to join in.
We don't run a visitor center, but I will say I'm on a group Facebook page with a bunch of my CEO colleagues, and that's a pretty consistent question. And I will say the majority of them have not reopened yet because they're all really trying to figure out how to make it work. And really one of the primary issues is the average age of a visitor center visitor is about 70. And so they're really trying to figure out what do we need to do above and beyond to make sure that we can keep these visitors safe. So we don't have one, so I'm not the best person, but I know that there are a lot of ongoing issues with that and some people who are
Sure.
stepping away from doing them in the future, and some people who are really going to like the protective shields in front of their visitor center desks. So I think there are a lot of changes that are going to be seen at visitor centers moving forward.
Yeah, I don't have anything to add on that because we don't have one.
If I can hop in, this is
Sure.
Kim in Peachtree City. We actually do have a visitor center. Our staff has been in office the whole time with the doors locked, but we've actually had folks call. So outside of the visitor center, we have information available for them. In fact, a local magazine producer who does kind of a magazine for residents and visitors has created a new piece, like a coloring book. Anyway, he knew we were a catalyst, and so he brought it over. It's out on the table. We're promoting it. He's promoting it. There'll be other places, but like during the epidemic, we also sell merchandise. And so we've had folks that will call in and go, you know, I know y'all are closed, but here's what we need. And so what we found was actually kind of, and I call it curbside. We're on the second floor. We're in the worst possible place for a visitor center. The leadership before I got here had put us on the second floor in a retail establishment, which cracks me up every day. I'm like, wow, this is crazy. But anyway, they park, they pay for it either online with their credit card, and that's how most of them have been doing it, or not online, on the phone with their credit card, or they'll leave cash in an envelope, and we leave the bag outside of the door. So we're still seeing that we have at least a little bit younger visitors, and I think ours are just from around the region. It's just different. And it's funny because everybody thinks we're a retirement community. It makes me laugh. But we don't see that many older residents or visitors. But yeah, so anyway, we are going to open when the city opens. The city is got a, how do you call a rollout strategy, so to speak. And so we'll follow that strategy, which will be in the same with the recreation department, library, and the city government. So we're going to kind of hold it down, see what we do. We have a big space. So we'll see what happens. But yeah, we aren't open, but we do provide the information, and we are doing point of sales.
Excellent. Anybody else have some insight into what they're doing with visitor centers? Chime in.
Does anybody else want to comment about that, and also any philosophy your community has adopted on your tourism message? Or are we too busy putting out fires to really think about that at this point?
I will say one thing that we have done that is worth other people maybe considering if you have the opportunity is kind of recalibrating existing programs. One thing that we recently just rolled out, and I think Amanda mentioned it, was we have a new program called the Gwinnett Creativity Fund, which was designed to be an arts grant program supporting arts and cultural programs. And like a lot of other arts grant programs, it had an operations grant and a project grant. And we've been working on it for a long time. And when we prepared to roll it out, we realized that all of our arts organizations that would in theory apply for an operations grant were struggling, and that many of them were shut down, as a matter of fact. So we were able to recalibrate it and essentially turn the operations portion of the grant into an arts relief grant. And so those dollars that those arts groups will apply for, they can utilize for rent or keeping their lights on or other things. And we have a lot of small arts organizations that don't have a lot of other opportunities as far as financial assets. And I think that's one of the things to think about, because with a lot of tourism organizations, y'all know that, with the PPP, 501c6s, DMOs were left out of the PPP process. Arts organizations had a very tough time being left out of a lot of the economic recovery funds. So a lot of the tourism organizations and partners didn't have a lot of recovery options. So one of the things that we've tried to look at is looking at our partners and seeing, are there ways that we can recalibrate some of our programming to help them, because there were not a lot of other governmental options that we have, at least in Georgia, to help our partners. So that's one thing that we've really been trying to look at, as we have looked at our budget and had to make a lot of changes, and we've had to make a lot of budget cuts, but we've tried to keep money in there to assist our partners if we can, even though we've had to make, like everyone else, very substantial budget cuts.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And I love that that's kind of sharing a pivot, and it's easy to see all the gaps that we have going on right now.
Right.
And so I'd really love to hear from anybody out there on little moments like that. Where have you been able to pivot and kind of fill that? And where is some innovation coming? Jennifer Callison, who asked about the visitor center, actually shared a piece, which I do want to share. And if anybody else be thinking about other things you guys have done to, start to solve some problems. But she talked about adding sneeze guards, doing the PPE for travelers counselor, and doing pre-packaged travel guides and maps that they're having ready to go, which I think is great. So any other wins that you guys have, to support?
Amanda, one thing that we've done here that's important, this kind of the secondary festival in this town, is the Ashland Independent Film Festival, of which I am the proud president of the board. And we were supposed to start on April 16th, gathering elderly people in theaters for hours and hours at a time. So clearly that couldn't happen. And so our amazing staff was able to pivot and make the whole thing online.
Wow.
We're launching on the 22nd. And so we've just in a matter of a month or so pivoted the whole thing and renegotiated all of the rights, all the contracts, set up a platform, created all the content, so that we'll have the film festival experience online, and we'll be able to promote nationally. So with any luck, we'll actually end up with more on the bottom line of the organization than we would have by doing a live festival and reaching a much greater audience. So we're excited about that. The jury's still out, but early responses are quite good. And so we're excited. And I think a lot of small towns will have to take we have to look at our assets. What is it that we love about our town, and see how we can share it using digital media, so that we can, even Oregon Shakespeare Festival is starting to do some streaming, which is a very complicated thing given all of the unionization of actors and performers, right? But anyway, that's underway as well.
Awesome. I love that. And I think that's part of it is, it's in a crisis, there's always opportunity that comes from it, because that's something you guys would have never tried. Why would you try to do a digital version of it if the live version works and is serving that need? So I love that. Robert, do you have anything else that you want to throw in, or Stephen or Lisa, as we kind of wrap up a little bit today, or anybody else from our audience?
I will add, Amanda, just on your last comment there, that I have an image. I did a blog post on how do we orient in this time. It's an incredibly disorienting time as leaders. How do you start figuring out where we are and making new decisions? Yeah. And there's an image of kind of a globe that has been cracked. All of the assumptions that we used to have, all the structures that used to be in place have been shifted, and there are new openings, and it's up to the leaders to look at those and discover if there's real gold inside there. So, like the fact that OSF is not running live this year, the Oregon Shakespeare Festival can't run live. What does that open up for us as a community? The conversation we could not have had a year ago or even 3 months ago now might be possible. Yeah. And so that's a very interesting and kind of empowering, hopefully, way of looking at this moment.
Stephen, if I could add to that, that's a great kind of segue into the point I wanted to make. And I have seen for communities to do strategic planning for economic development, tourism, and those kinds of activities, very often a crisis precipitates that. A plant closes or an Air Force base closes, and here we have a universal crisis. And you mentioned earlier that Ashland is looking at diversifying its economic base. And I just hope that one silver lining, if it's possible, to come out of this mess is that so many communities realize that, hey, we've got to plan for the future. And need to diversify the economy, and we need to really figure out what our tourism message going forward is going to be. So those of you listening, if anybody in your community is listening, I hope you'll advocate, really, if you're not already, doing a strategic plan for the future for economic development. Because I always say, if you don't plan for the future, is going to happen to you. So I very much appreciate your comments.
Yeah, I would add, we came up with a tagline for our little conversation. It's not even an organization that we have, but our conversation around this, and that is plan for the worst and work for the best.
Yeah.
Because we have a plan that's on the shelf, it's on the city's website, but we didn't really implement it. So we now are still sitting in the very tippy canoe of tourism here in Ashland. And we really need to now build that outrigger that will give us more stability in the years to come.
Right. And one of my absolute least favorite sayings is, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. I would like to have a t-shirt that said, if it ain't broke, it's going to be, so you'd better start figuring out how to fix it.
Yeah.
Right. And I think, to your point, like we follow our marketing plan pretty well, and we'll adjust if we need to. And we had just completed our 2020 marketing plan, and I could toss it over my shoulder right now. And I think the challenge is right now, a strategic plan is literally a 30-day, a 60-day, a 90-day, because we do not have any idea where we're going to be 120 days from now. And we're an industry that is designed about groups and meeting and bringing people together. And we don't know in the future whether it's all going to be online, or, whether that's going to come back into, whether that's going to be a possibility. And so really reformulating and recalibrating what we're able to do is really going to be a challenge, because I know for myself, I have positions that are distinctly designed for in-person meetings that I have to completely reformulate, do away with, change. There's a lot of change in my future within my own organization. I know that for a fact.
Absolutely, Lisa. This is really at the core question for me, which is, how as leaders do we kind of run through what in the military they call an OODA loop, right? We need to observe and orient ourselves in this new reality, for which we have literally no models, not good ones. And then we have to decide, and then we have to act, right? That's the OODA. And if it's okay, I can put a link into a blog post that I have that explains all of this. But it's absolutely, we are in a time of remarkable uncertainty. And I'm with you that the time horizons have collapsed, but we also at the same time need to be, while we're working in kind of time horizon 1, what McKinsey calls time horizon 1, which is the next several months, we also have to be thinking about time horizons 2 and 3, the next year to 3 years, and then 3 to 5 years. And we need to begin to really get disciplined about observing widely and in detail about what exactly is the reality on the ground, and then find new models for understanding what we're seeing and what might be true that we can either is true and we have to deal with it, or true that we could create.
And to start that process, Lisa, to your point about the uncertainty, is number one, to establish a long-term vision for the community. What do you want your community to be in the second and third time horizon? And then develop goals and objectives about how to reach that vision. It's remarkable how unifying that can be for a community planning going forward.
That's exactly right. I think that we need to call our communities together in conversation, so that, and that alone will be build confidence and empowerment, right? Which is both are missing right now in most communities.
Absolutely, absolutely. And Stephen, thank you for posting that. We'll send that link out in the follow-up, because we recorded this. We'll do a little post write up for anybody who is here and anybody who wasn't able to be here. Robert, do you have any closing, or Lisa or Stephen, any closing comments before we wrap up today?
Yeah, just thank you for inviting me. It's, you know, it's like every time I'm on one of these, I learn something interesting and new. Every day is kind of an evolution these days.
Absolutely, yeah. We're in that observation mode, to Stephen's point of where can we get, we talk about Zoom fatigue, but there's a reason that we keep hopping on these every day, is how are we getting together? How are we coming together? And in Janus style, that's what we're keeping and continuing to model, because this is how we're going to solve and come up with answers, and we don't have to work as hard if we can start to share.
Right.
And please go to the prosperousplaces.org website, prosperousplaces.org, and we'll have a summary of this. And I blog with us. It'll be a blog on Prosperous Places, and please ask questions, make comments. Please share. Those of you that are on, please share with us your some of your experiences and questions, and we can keep the discussion going.
Absolutely, absolutely. So
it's great. You know, just a final thing, and sharing and being connected, you know, that you guys are hosting this conversation is a great gift. And this is a solution. You know, I was in the office supply business. I made the mistake of getting into the office supply business in the late 80s as Office Depot and Staples started and took out half of all the family-run businesses in this country. We went from 6,000 dealers to 3,000 dealers in just a few years. And the only way we got through that is that we got together and we started sharing ideas, and we started sharing marketing, and we started sharing buying or purchasing power. And we ended up having 1,000 independent businesses across this country cooperating, some in the same markets. And we realized that the competition was not the other guy, it was something else, right? And I think we'll, even in the tourism business, we realize now that the competitor may be not the county next door, but the fact that people are just going to stay home. And so it'll be really interesting to see this group, and thank you, Janus, for hosting it, kind of begin to collaborate and figure those things out and share best practices and good ideas.
Yep.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, thank you, Stephen and Lisa, for joining us today and sharing your experiences and your knowledge. And as I said, we'll have recordings and write-ups and share links. So if there's anything else the two of you have you want us to share, just shoot them over to us, and we'll include them in the follow-up that goes out probably later today, if not early tomorrow, depending on how quick Zoom is to get us recordings, because
Awesome.
our new reality. So well, thank you, everyone.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right.
Bye, y'all.
Have a great
Bye.
day.
Bye-bye.
Bye.